Welcome to another deep dive. This time, we're heading to a place I think we're all pretty familiar with, the supermarket. You know, those aisles of endless possibilities, tempting displays, that familiar smell of freshly baked bread. But have you ever stopped to think about how these shopping behemoths came to be?
It's funny how something so commonplace can have such a fascinating backstory. We're diving into a YouTube documentary today called How Supermarkets Took Over from the channel Get.Factual. And let me tell you, it really unpacks how this retail giant went from a quirky concept to a global phenomenon.
So let's rewind the clock a bit. Imagine a world without supermarkets. You need ingredients for dinner, so you head to the butcher, then it's off to the baker and the greengrocer. It's a trek, to say the least.
Absolutely. It was a whole different world back then. Daily trips to multiple shops. And forget about stocking up, you could only carry so much. Shopping was a social event centered around these small, specialized stores.
It makes you wonder who first dreamed of a one-stop shop for everything.
Hmm.
And that's where Vincent Astor comes in, right? This guy back in 1915 had this visionary idea, a gigantic megastore to meet all your needs. He called it the Astor Market, but, well, didn't quite work out.
It was ahead of its time, really. Astor's Market had departments for everything, but it was missing one crucial element: self-service. Shoppers still relied on individual clerks to fetch items for them. People just weren't ready to embrace that level of autonomy.
So Astor's grand vision fizzled out, and shoppers went back to their familiar routines. But the idea of a self-service grocery store didn't die there. Enter Clarence Saunders in 1916. Down in Memphis, Tennessee, he launched Piggly Wiggly, and that's where things really start to change.
Now, Piggly Wiggly, that was revolutionary. Saunders introduced the concept of self-service. Think aisles, shopping baskets, the freedom to browse and choose. It was a game changer, though not everyone was thrilled about it at first.
I can imagine. It must have been a huge shift. Suddenly you're on your own, navigating this maze of food, having to make all these choices. People must have been a little overwhelmed.
Definitely. It was a radical departure from the norm. But Saunders was a smart guy. He understood that self-service meant more efficiency, lower costs, and ultimately lower prices, which was a huge draw for customers. And he knew that letting people browse freely would lead to more impulse purchases.
Clever strategy. So Piggly Wiggly starts to catch on. The idea of self-service is taking root. But let's not forget, this is also the era of Henry Ford. People are driving those shiny new cars, but they need places to park.
Which leads us to 1930 and the rise of King Cullen, the first true supermarket with a massive parking lot. It was like the missing piece of the puzzle. Now you could drive to the store, load up on groceries, and for the first time ever do that weekly shop.
Parking lots. Seriously, who knew they'd be such a game changer for supermarkets? But even with convenience and bigger baskets, these stores still needed ways to get people buying even more.
Right. They'd cracked convenience, so the next challenge was maximizing those shopping carts. And along comes Sylvan Goldman in 1937 with his ingenious invention, the shopping cart. But believe it or not, it wasn't an instant hit. People actually hated it.
Wait, they hated shopping carts, but why? Those things are practically synonymous with supermarkets now. What was there to dislike?
It was all about cultural perceptions. Men back then thought pushing a cart was unmanly. It reminded them of baby carriages, and women didn't want to be seen lugging groceries around like a burden.
So how did Goldman change people's minds? Because obviously, shopping carts are everywhere now.
He was a brilliant marketer. He hired actors, handsome men, and stylish women to casually stroll through the store pushing these carts, made them look fashionable, desirable. Talk about early influencer marketing.
Genius. But just as supermarkets are hitting their stride, the world is plunged into the Great Depression. Tough times. You'd think that would have been disastrous for a new industry like this.
You'd think so, right? But actually, the Depression inadvertently helped solidify supermarkets' place. Their focus on lower prices and bulk buying resonated even more with people struggling to make ends meet.
So they weathered the storm, and then, just as things are starting to recover, World War II hits. How did supermarkets fare during the war?
World War II ended up being another turning point for supermarkets. With millions of men away fighting, smaller shops struggled with labor shortages. But supermarkets, with their self-service model, were less reliant on staff, gave them a real edge.
So it sounds like a combination of innovation and circumstance really propelled supermarkets to the forefront. They survived the Depression, thrived during the war, and then, well, the post-war boom, that's when things really took off, right?
Oh, yeah. The post-war years were huge for supermarkets. It's when things really started to boom. People had more money, they were eager to spend it, and new technologies were emerging, like freezers becoming a common fixture in homes. Supermarkets saw the opportunity and jumped right on it.
Right. And that's when we see the rise of frozen food, right? Frozen veggies, frozen meats, those early TV dinners. It's like a whole new level of convenience was unlocked.
It totally transformed how people cooked and ate. But supermarkets didn't stop there. They became, well, kind of like masters of psychology. They started using all these subtle tactics to shape our shopping habits. Think about those eye-catching displays, the vibrant colors, all designed to lure you in.
Yeah, those strategically placed end caps, the buy one, get one free deals. They definitely know how to tempt us. But it's the stuff we don't even realize that I find fascinating. Like, did you know they actually manipulate the color of bananas?
Oh, yeah. Turns out those bright yellow bananas don't sell as well as the ones with the softer, more buttercup yellow, because that softer yellow makes us think of ripeness. It's all about tapping into our subconscious desires.
It's amazing what influences our choices without us even knowing it. And it's not just bananas. The documentary mentioned how they even tweak the color of salmon to match that bright pink that consumers prefer, even though wild salmon comes in all sorts of shades.
They really have thought of everything. And it's not just about colors and placement. They also understand there are different types of shoppers. The documentary talked about locators, who know exactly what they want, get in and get out. Then there are the explorers, who like to browse a bit more within a category. And then the dreamers, who are open to inspiration and more likely to make those impulse purchases.
I guess that's why supermarkets design their layout so strategically. Put those essential staples like bread and milk near the front for the locators, and then tuck those tempting treats deeper in the aisles for the dreamers to stumble upon.
Exactly. And remember that 40-minute rule we talked about earlier? The one that says after about 40 minutes in a store, our shopping habits change and we become more susceptible to impulse buys. Well, supermarkets use that to their advantage.
Yeah, they intentionally design their stores to keep us there longer. Think about it. No windows, soft music playing. It's all very calming, almost like you lose track of time.
It's kind of like a casino, in a way. Subtly disorienting, but in a pleasant way that keeps you shopping. And those winding aisles, they make sure you have to weave through the whole store to find what you need, maximizing your exposure to all those tempting products along the way.
While this model has obviously been incredibly successful for supermarkets, the documentary also pointed out some of the downsides, especially when it comes to the environmental impact.
Yeah, that's the other side of the coin, right? The convenience of having all this food available anytime comes at a cost. The global transport of food, the intensive farming practices, all that food waste, it's a lot.
It's a complex issue for sure. And on top of that, supermarkets are now facing a whole new set of challenges with the rise of online shopping and delivery services like Amazon. Remember that part of the documentary?
Yeah, how they're struggling to make online delivery profitable. It's a logistical nightmare, apparently.
Yeah.
Shipping fresh food is way more complicated than shipping books or electronics.
Makes sense. But they're trying all sorts of things to figure it out. Robots for picking and packing, even those driverless delivery vehicles. It feels like we're at another turning point in how we get our groceries.
We definitely are. And it's not just about how we shop, but also what we're buying. The documentary talked about these alternative protein sources, plant-based meats, insects even. It's like the future of food is being shaped right before our eyes.
Yeah, not sure about the insects, although I did try a cricket flour protein bar once. It wasn't bad. But that part about 3D printed food, now that's pretty mind-blowing. Meals tailored to your specific dietary needs, printed right there in your kitchen.
It sounds like science fiction, right?
Ah,
But it could very well be our reality soon.
it's amazing to think about how far things have come. From clunky shopping carts to robot deliveries and the potential for 3D printed meals, the evolution of the supermarket has been, well, pretty remarkable.
Yeah, and it's still evolving. The big question now is, with technology advancing so rapidly, what role will the physical supermarket play in the future? Will we even need to go to the store anymore?
Yeah, it really makes you wonder, will those massive aisles and overflowing shelves become a thing of the past? Will we all be ordering our groceries online? Or maybe even, getting those 3D printed meals delivered right to our doorstep?
It's a question a lot of people are asking. Some experts predict the death of the physical supermarket, but others think they'll adapt, maybe even transform into something entirely new.
Okay, so what if instead of just disappearing, supermarkets become more like, I don't know, community hubs? Places that offer more than just groceries.
Yeah. Imagine supermarkets with cooking classes, or maybe even like vertical farms where you can pick your own produce, or spaces for people to gather and connect.
That's a really cool idea. It's almost like coming full circle back to that social aspect of shopping that existed before supermarkets took over. So instead of just a place to buy food, it becomes a place to connect, to learn, maybe even to contribute to a more sustainable food system.
Exactly. And the supermarket, this thing that revolutionized how we shop and eat, might be on the verge of another big transformation. And technology could play a huge role in shaping what that looks like.
It's amazing to think how far we've come from those early shopping carts to robot deliveries and the possibility of 3D printed food. It all started with a simple question: how did supermarkets get so big? And now we're contemplating the future of food and retail.
It really shows you how something as ordinary as a trip to the grocery store can have a rich history and a huge impact on our lives.
It's definitely given us a lot to think about. So as we wrap up, here's a question for our listeners. What role do you want supermarkets to play in our lives? What kind of future do you see for these spaces?
We'd love to hear your thoughts and predictions.
Share your ideas on social media using hashtag #DeepDiveSupermarkets. We're really curious to see what you envision for the future of grocery shopping. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of supermarkets.